And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 206, presented by CLNS Media and sponsored by our good friends over at FanDuel and Factor Meals. My name is Conor Ryan. Today we are once again joined by the esteemed 98.5 The Sports Hub's Ty Anderson. Ty, how you doing?
I feel like I'm doing better than you based on how you sound, and that's a rarity. Usually it's the other way around. Usually you're the one sounding great, and I'm sounding like absolute garbage because my voice is always gone. So here we are. We're able to get through it, though, I hope, and it's good to be back with you.
Ty, I don't view myself as a very dramatic person, but I'm in hell. This isn't great. I'm trucking through, as you said. Got an upper body injury. Can't fucking talk. I can slightly talk, but it's better than what it was a few days ago. I was telling Evan that a few days ago I sounded like a mix of like when SpongeBob didn't get his water with like Emperor Palpatine. Which, if you're listening to that in the car to a hockey podcast, I can't imagine it's pleasant. That's not a good ASMR voice to listen to as we like talk about Jeremy Swayman, the Calgary Flames, or anything like that. It can't be pleasant. So I'm at least slightly getting better. Now I just sound slightly haggard, which I think is more enjoyable than where it was before. So we're making a little bit of progress here, I would say.
Yeah, as long as you don't die on me, and then I have to give a statement of some sort. That's
That
all that I
that'd be
care
so
about, to be
long.
honest with you.
And you don't even have the admin thing for this recording thing, so you wouldn't even know what to do. This video would run for like 7 hours. It'd be just Ty being like,
Just,
"Do I call 911?" Like, ah, shit, no. Maybe
yeah,
if you'd
I don't know
have
what I
like,
would do.
you'd have Doom on camera. That'd be kind of cool. It'd be me like just like passed out. But
Yeah, she's over here. She's chilling.
okay,
She
good.
might pop
We don't have
over.
to bring.
We never know.
Okay, good to know. Hopefully not while I'm deceased or anything like that.
No,
So
we don't want that.
no, we do not want that. So let's pivot into the Bruins talk here. Bruins start their Western Canada road trip with a 6-5 overtime win over the Oilers. A bananas game. As someone who was trying to go to sleep at a reasonable hour, your boys' white blood cells, immune system was in hell in a complete bender as I stayed up till 1 a.m. to watch that game. Great, entertaining game. Bruins, I think, as we all expected, weren't going to have as much gas in the tank. The following night, bit of a slog against the Calgary Flames, lose 3-2 in overtime to them, but still get a point out of it. Ty, the Bruins as a whole have been playing not that great, I would say, for an extended stretch here, especially since the All-Star break. But getting 3 points out of three out of a possible 4 points to start off this road trip, what's kind of been your big takeaways as to their play as of late?
Yeah, I think even if we go back to the Monday game and the Saturday loss to the LA Kings, I think the biggest difference, and you saw it play out in Edmonton, and you saw it maybe not play out in Calgary in the overtime, was that your best players were making plays. You go back to Monday against the Stars, and David Pastrnak ties it up, and Charlie McAvoy wins it in the shootout. And then you go to Tuesday in Edmonton. Well, David Pastrnak gives you the go-ahead goal after you blow a 3-goal lead. Uh, the Oilers tie it up, sure, but then in the overtime, McAvoy, plays hero again. And so, I think that's sort of the big difference for this team down the second half here in the stretch here is that their best players are going to have to be their horses every single night. And everything you get from, the bottom of the roster is kind of a bonus, right? But, McAvoy, Pastrnak, you see it last night with Charlie Coyle, scores 2 goals. Like that's what they need. And the amount of contributions they get from those guys and their goaltending, that's going to make the difference for them down the stretch. I mean, this roster by now, it is what it is, right? And I think we all have to acknowledge that to some degree. So it's really about the top of the roster. And this is not rocket science. I know when the top of the roster produces, this team has a greater chance of winning. And really, I think that's my biggest takeaway is that they are so top heavy that it really is on them every single night. And if they don't get it, it's going to be harder to win games.
Yeah, and I think too, you look at just the way this roster's set up. One thing that I've kind of noticed, and I think I've hit a stage of acceptance at this point, Ty, is we're gonna get to late March, we're gonna get to early April right for the playoffs. And I'm pretty confident now in saying I have no clue what the fuck these lines are gonna look like. That I feel like when you look at just the mixing and matching, I don't know if you can glean off of like what we've seen the last couple of games, but the days of like having like a set, even top 6 doesn't seem to be the case anymore. But you look now at like Frederick on the fourth line. You look at that fourth line, right? And you've had guys who I think have stepped up as of late, like Anthony Richard's had a couple of good games, had a good setup for Coyle's goal in Calgary. Justin Brazeau has been pretty solid. I feel like every shot he's had has been within 5 feet of the ice, which a winning formula, I would say, for a guy like that. But I think you look at just the way this team is constructed, and like it kind of complements your point of you have to rely on your big guns to kind of bail you out. Seems like the whole rest of the roster, like you'll take the contributions, you'll need them, right? Like you'll need Coyle to keep on contributing. I think you saw how good this team is when a guy like DeBrusque is dialed in because he was money. I think in that Oilers game, he was awesome in that one. You need those contributions and you'll welcome them, but hoping for like some consistency with these lines or some set identity being built. I feel like it's just not going to be the case. I mean, we can look specifically at that fourth line where you've got Bolquist and Richard and Frederick if he's down there or Lauco, what have you. I feel like that you're going to be mixing and matching that group all the way up into the playoffs, and then hell, probably in the playoffs as well. So I feel like when you look at this team, yes, they've got a lot of intriguing pieces, but I think the days of like maybe the Cassidy days of where it's like, all right, this is maybe the criticism for him was he's not moving his lines that much. I feel like it's the opposite now, and I feel like you're not going to get any sort of, I don't know if cohesion is the word, right? Because that seems like it means these guys are going to be sputtering in the playoffs, but any set idea of what these lines are going to be, I feel like just throw that out the window at that point. You can't expect that now going to the playoffs.
Yeah, and you listened to Jim Montgomery last night in Calgary talking about the switches that he made because he made some pretty drastic ones. I think at one point you had Lauco with Zaka, and I forget who the other one was, but like, and he was asked about it. He's always asked about it, but he was asked about it, and he said, certain guys didn't have their legs, and then I went back to the other lines when I realized guys got their legs, and it's like he is such a field-based coach that
Yeah.
it just feels like, especially this year, it's going to be constant, right? It's going to be a constant test of, okay, who has it, who doesn't. All right, change it up, go from there. And so, and I think that really, to your point, like with the roster they have, with Anthony Richard, with Justin Brazeau, with, Morgan Geekie, who can play center and wing, with Trent Frederick, who can play center and wing. JVR can play left and right if you really need him to. Like, and so when you have that kind of roster, it really opens up your options and opens up your ability to be, the mad scientist always tinkering with your lines. And it's good and bad. I think some nights it works out, other nights it doesn't. I do wonder how aggressive he'll be with it in the playoffs, just because I think it's a little bit, playoffs, you want to get your matchups, right? You want to figure out, okay, who can cancel out this guy or who can take advantage of this or that, right? And so I think it's harder to do that in the playoffs, but this may be just the hand they're dealt. Like I feel this way about the defense. I feel this way about the defense to a certain degree. That with what they have right now, it is what it is, man. It's going to suck sometimes. They're going to have some combos that get their ass beat on occasion. It's about just surviving the night. Like, this is what it is. And that's kind of what it feels like with the forwards as well, where it's a nightly test to maximum, to optimize what you have there. And you got to move them around. And it's going to be weird and it's going to be kind of annoying at times, but it's sort of, this is what you signed up for. When you knew you had $4.5 million in overages, and you knew the cap wasn't going up. I mean, this is kind of what it is. And it's kind of crazy to think how much worse it could have been. Like if you traded, player X and Y to keep player Z, like, man, this could be a whole lot worse than it is right now, which is saying a lot considering how good they've been, despite their frustrations and their struggles at times to have a consistent lineup, so to speak.
Right. And and again, you look at just the guys they've signed, like they've hit on a lot of guys, right? We look at like I think Kiki's been really solid. JVR's like hell, he's on pace for a fucking 50-point season, right? Like they've hit on these guys. It's just the mixing and matching and kind of that constant adjustments from Montgomery seems like it's been necessary on his part. So we'll see where we get to once we get some, match in April. Again, who knows if they even add at the deadline. There could be a guy on the fourth line that fits in there and gets everyone settled in. There could be a guy they get on the third line, what have you. Defense, obviously, like there's a whole lot still up in the air. So I think the early days I remember back in like October, November being like, they need to keep Callie Coyle next to Trent Frederick. And it's like, those days are long gone. Like those days of feels like a long, long time ago. So hoping for that any sort of that cohesion anymore. Throw it out the window at this point. Like don't worry about it and see kind of where the chips fall once we get to April. So um, I will say one thing, Ty. It's probably worth noting with this stretch here, and especially that Oilers game, which again, great theater, great hockey, especially if you're probably a neutral fan watching that. I don't know who the hell was up that late, but uh, I think you look at that game. Jeremy Swayman has, I think, a 900 flat save percentage since the All Star break, and again, made some timely saves in overtime. Stepped up when needed, but timely saves I think is a Bruce Cassidy staple, right? Of making the save at the right time to stem the tide when the team is pushing, when there's momentum is all on your side, and you can't have a goal leak through. He's been prone to a few of those over these last couple of games where, again, like you can have a great game where you're stopping 28 of 31 shots, what have you. But when you give up a goal at a critical time, and you saw that during that shot from Cece that snuck through and Yenmark jammed it home, like again, Swayman's been very good this year. I think like he's been a very solid goalie, but there has been times where those leaky goals, those uh, timely saves hasn't been there, and it's really kind of cost the Bruins. And it's something that I think you have to be aware of once we get to the playoffs. That the margin for error is so small that if you're playing a high-powered team like Toronto or Florida, can't have those situations pop up.
100%. And it's really interesting, right? Like, again, you go back. If you go back to Monday's game, I hate that I keep rewinding beyond the road trip here, but you go back to Monday's game. 43 saves, career high. I got to be honest, a little bit of a fraudulent 43 save night, in my opinion. A lot of low danger looks from the Stars, a team that just kind of funnels pucks to the net from their point. So I don't want to take too much away from him. I didn't love the Esa Lindell goal. I didn't love it. It's a 2-on-1. Lindell's got shot all the way. It's Esa freaking Lindell. It's not it's not Wyatt Johnson coming down on you or Jason Robertson. And so you look at that, you go, you need a save there. Like you want to save there. And then he makes up for it, though. He makes up for it with the great shootout. He keeps them alive when their guys aren't scoring on Jake Ottinger, and then they win it. And so it's hard to crush him for that. And then you go to the Edmonton game. He faces 18 shots in the third period. He allows, I think, 4 goals or something in the last 18 shots he faces. Like that can't happen, right? And here's the part that's it puts him in a tough spot because once again they go to overtime. He makes 2 amazing saves with the Bruins down a man, and then they win the game. So it's kind of like it all comes out even in the wash. But this is a guy that we're talking about having to, the Bruins having to pay maybe $6.5-7 million on his next contract. And you can look at some of those goals there and say, okay, well, they didn't, what's Derek Forbort doing here, or what's Mason Lowry doing here? The 5th goal, Mason Lowry sees Zach Hyman. He tries to stop him. He really doesn't do anything to tie up his stick or anything in front of the net, and then Hyman scores. Hyman's a very good net front guy. We will all admit that. However, those are situations where you need your all-star goalie to be your all-star goalie. It can't always be the Goldilocks. It has to be the perfect temperature for him to play well, because then guess what? Then he's not, the $6.5 million goalie. If you need the perfect situation in front of him for him to be good, he's not the franchise guy. He's not the all-star guy. And that sounds harsh, and it sounds way harsher than I mean for it to sound. But this is the legitimate sort of argument that, people look at the goaltending team way too cut and dry in terms of Swayman is the guy, you got to trade Ullmark. Well, if we're talking in May and they didn't win a round and both guys have the same problems, I don't know if I'm as eager to pay Jeremy Swayman $6.5 million a year or $7 million a year if he and Ullmark are the same guy and they have the same problems. And so I don't know. I just think that Swayman's issues right now, these are not new issues. And we're in year 4 now. You got to sort of find the level, so to speak. He can beat nails for a month. And then for 2 weeks, he can't get you that big save when you need it. And so This reminds me a little bit of 22. If you go back to 2022, he was electric in February. I think he was goalie of the month or rookie of the month. It was
Yeah.
something. It was
Yeah, he
something
was
like
locked
that.
in.
He had a 935, I want to say, and then for the next 2 months, he lost the job. He lost it to Ullmark, who was surging. So it's tough because they're winning the games, and he's making some big plays. I think he's also putting you in spots that you don't necessarily have to be in, so to speak. And
Mhm.
and so timely saves, that's the name of the game. Timely saves and Bruins fans, I love you to death. You got to start looking at him like he's not the 20-year-old who came straight from Maine. Like he's got some years now and he's going to get paid. So the expectations, I think, should rise with it personally.
Yeah. You can't just blame Derek Forbort every time, is what I would also
No,
say. Every time there's a goal, it's like, fucking Forbort's like, Forbort's drinking a Gatorade on the bench, guys. Like, he's not even out there right now. Again, like, Forbort's not been good. We will say that. But it's something that has to fall on Swayman, obviously. And it's actually crazy. Like, again, we're talking about the most high pressure spot in, arguably sports with the goaltending. And these guys are, you know, have to compartmentalize that year in and year out. But you look at like Swayman, the pressure that's going to be on him this year of like probably being the game one starter with a contract on the horizon, like has made it known like how much he didn't like the arbitration and wanting to prove stuff, and has those comments out in the open that he's said. It's not like they've been really pried out, like that he said them. Like he's going into this playoffs with a whole lot on his shoulders beyond the obvious fact of all-star goalie trying to put this team over the hump after a crushing first round exit. Like it's got a lot to prove. Both him and Olmark, obviously. Like Olmark, you get to see if he's able to get you past the first round as well. But um there's a lot riding on Swayman this year. Like a whole lot, both for the team, but especially just his own play. Because as you said, like Bruins gonna have a tough spot right now this offseason. Yes, they've got a lot of cap space, but like what are you gonna do with that spot at goaltending? Because if you're allocating 11, 12 million to two goalies, that's
it's
pretty
going to
tough.
hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't, in my opinion, you can't add a left shot D, a center, if that's still of interest to them, a center or just a high impact forward, right? Resign Swayman and keep Allmark and keep Jake DeBrusk. Like you're
Yeah.
probably only gonna be able to do 2 of the 4, in my opinion, because you got to build out a bottom of the roster, and you can bring in league minimum guys and try to replicate what you've done this past year, but that's hard. Some years you hit, other years you don't. Look at the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa Bay Lightning have been able to bring in some guys on the cheap that were really good, and other years you're like, oh, this guy's cooked. Why do they have him?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's the hard part. The Blackhawks went through that as well. The Kings went through that as well. Well, you bring in cheap guys, veteran guys, and sometimes they got to go to the glue factory. It's over for them, and so it's something worth watching. I think the biggest thing that my biggest takeaway, Connor, from all of this is that I can tell you right now that the goaltending rotation is going to happen in the playoffs. It's going to happen, but I'm now saying that it needs to happen. If you go and watch these guys there on one day of rest this year, Jeremy Swayman is now 3-0-2 with a 911 save percentage and a 294 goals against average. I don't think he's been particularly great when having to play 2 games in a row. Linus Ullmark, with one day of rest this year, 1-1-1 with an 886 save percentage. Neither guy has been particularly, great when it comes to, or to their standard, when they have to play 2 games in a row. And so I think that if I've learned anything from this goaltending, the tandem this year, it's that they have to go with the tandem, because neither one has proven to be a workhorse quite yet. And maybe they get there. And in the playoffs, you have to kind of ride the vibes of who looks better and who's playing better when it comes to doling out a consecutive start. But right now, I'm if anything, this year has proven to me, okay, you got to go with it because nobody's taken it and truly ran with it, in my opinion. Both of them look well or look really good when the other one is complimenting them with some time off. And so I'm not deviating from that. And I know there's been some stuff out there about it, but my opinion and my belief is that they have no appetite to make that trade in season.
Yeah, no, I don't see any situation where they'd move a guy like Olmark, regardless of what the return is, right? I think you can't go into as Albert Baris from The Sopranos said, you can't go into the unknown not knowing. So you can't go into the playoffs with just one of those goalies out there for sure. So, Ty, we'll take a quick little break here before we talk a little bit more about that Oilers game. Listen to our good friends over at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with things like quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and a whole lot more. Just visit FanDuel.com/Boston and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Shout out once again to our good friends over at FanDuel. Ty, I would say when you look at that Bruins Oilers game, a lot of, I think, neutral parties, though, watching that one, we're saying that was one of the more entertaining games of the year. So, quick little segue here. How excited would you be for a Bruins Oilers Stanley Cup final? Because yeah, I'll tell you, I'd be fucking terrified.
Yeah, I'd probably be more the latter than the former. That's a lot of high end skill on that team between Bouchard and McDavid and Draisaitl, Hyman. Like even guys at the bottom of their roster, like Ryan McLeod, like they've taken some steps this year, and they've been a really good team, really exciting team to watch. Their goaltending still is. I don't know if they get there. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
They're kind of the opposite of the Bruins in the sense that you feel pretty good about the Bruins goaltending, and you feel as if if they go on a run, it's going to be because of their goaltending. Whereas the Oilers, I feel like if they don't go on a run, it's going to be because of their goaltending. Like
Right.
ultimately, that's how I feel about that team. Yeah, that'd be interesting. I still think Vegas and Dallas are the class of the Western Conference, in my opinion.
Mhm.
I'm really high on Dallas. I think Dallas is going to win the Western Conference this year. But Edmonton, I mean, that is premier skill, right? And you see it. You see how exhausting it is to try to keep them at bay. You felt like it was a win that the Bruins kept them to, what was it, 2 goals through 40 minutes. And then, here comes
Mhm.
the push. And when that push comes, it is hard to stop them. They are a freight train kind of team when they get rolling. So, would be a terrifying matchup. Would be an absolutely terrifying matchup for the Bruins. It's what's really interesting though is that, like, in theory, if you have Lindholm and Carlo and McAvoy, like, you kind of have the size and the movement to maybe limit
Yeah.
them a little bit in terms of how rangy that second pairing can be and just how good McAvoy can be. I thought McAvoy was great. That was a game where McAvoy was really like, "Hey, you got to
Took
be the
over.
guy," and he was the guy. So that'd be the biggest key, in that kind of a series. And it's a long way to go for both teams. Both teams have a lot to prove. It feels like this postseason. Whether it's the Oilers looking at their core and saying, "Can we do it with this core?" or the
Mhm.
Bruins saying, "Okay, we got to make a big addition here." And so there's a lot kind of riding on, I think, these teams' playoff runs here.
Yeah, without a doubt. And yeah, I agree too. Like Dallas is the ultimate team. You look at just their roster, how they play, and you're like, that's a team that's going to win 2 or 3 rounds. Like you just look at like defense can do a lot there, generate offense, a lot of big bodies back there, a lot of scoring depth. They've got the veteran guy like Pavelski. They got Robertson. They've got a great goalie. That's a team that just the way they're built can trudge and truck their way through a couple different rounds. But as you said, probably the most appealing matchup has to be Bruins Vegas if it gets to that point. Give me the Cassidy storylines. Give me the Cassidy post game pressers that go for like a Tolkien chapter. It's like 20 minutes long. Would be great
Oh, it'd be the
theater
best. Be
if
the
they had
best.
it would be perfect. So and again
Espe-
Vancouver. Right? Oh yeah, go.
no, I was gonna say like Vegas, especially like the whole. I just think those teams always play great games. They
Yeah.
always play great games. Like, no matter the roster construct, no matter what team, what Vegas or Boston is missing in that game, they always have entertaining games. So that'd be a great one as well.
Yeah. Bruce is also has never shied away from the fact that he's openly enjoys trying to beat the Bruins now, which is great. So many coaches now are either like downplay stuff or I remember like I think it was the first game after the Stanley played the Blues here. Like what was it? Like early November. And I think people asked like Cassidy, like any extra meetings? Like, no. And then like I forget who it was. Someone flattened the Blues player like right off the jump in that game. There was like 3 fights. It was a great game. And I was like, yeah, of course, like that was going to happen. But a lot of coaches don't like to tip their hand over that. Bruce Cassidy has openly always talked about like, yeah, no, I enjoyed beating this team. And then even like last year, right? Like when the Bruins were on a roll, he's like, hopefully play him in the spring. Everyone was excited about that. And
Yeah.
then what happened? So
That
would
was
make
almost
for
that felt like him almost calling them out. Like, yeah, we'll see if you can do it.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. As it relates to Vegas and even Edmonton, that'd be the first round matchup right now in that
Yeah.
bracket. And so that's why I look at the Oiler team and go, I don't see you beating Vegas. I'm sorry. I don't see it happening. So I think Edmonton needs to make another move. I think they got to make one more move. I think to really kind of try to put them over the top because, you mentioned how good they've been this year. We're talking about, McLeod and Perry and even oh God, who's the guy who scored the goal? It doesn't matter. But like you look at their roster and you're like, okay, if you got one more piece, if you got one more guy, now you're cooking with gas. And so really interesting to watch those teams. But yeah, like I think that when it comes to the Bruins, we're talking about the Bruins making the Stanley Cup final. It'd be amazing. At this point, I'll settle for winning 2 rounds. Give me
Yeah.
something beyond 6 games or 7 games in the opening round. Like I got to see a step forward here, and this is where it comes back to the goaltending, right? Like I got to see one of these guys get the monkey off their back, win a playoff round, take the net and run with it. If they don't just split it as a tandem and are successful doing it that way. Swayman's got a 901 career save percentage in the playoffs. Linus is like an 890, I want to say 885, something like that. Like you got it. Like one of these guys has got to take the net and just be reliable and be a true presence out there. So hopefully that happens for the Bruins this spring.
Yes, hopefully the Bruins are playing into at least May this time around. So before we wrap up this podcast, Ty, let's take another quick break. Hear from our friends over at Factor Meals.
Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating better every day easy. Wherever tomorrow takes you, be ready with pre-prepared, chef-crafted, and dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. There are 2-minute meals, fuel up fast, with Factor's restaurant-quality meals that are ready to heat and eat whenever you are. There's snacks, smoothies, and more. Discover a wide variety of easy options for the entire day, like breakfast, midday bites, and more. Sign up and save. We've done the math. Factor is less expensive than takeout, and every meal is dietitian approved to be nutritious and delicious. Factor is the perfect solution if you're looking for fast, upscale options done easily, and they're flexible for your schedule. Get as much or as little as you need by choosing 6 to 18 meals per week. Plus, you can pause or reschedule your deliveries anytime. And no prep, no mess meals. Factor meals are 100% ready to heat and ready to eat, and there's no prepping, cooking, or cleanup needed. So, head to factormeals.com/Bruins50 and use code Bruins50 to get 50% off. That's code Bruins50 at factormeals.com/Bruins50 to get 50% off. Now, back to the show.
Once again, shout out to our good friends over at Factor Meals. All right, Ty, let's end this podcast with a familiar topic we've talked about. Noah Hannafin. Bruins played him again on Thursday in Calgary. And I think we've talked about before that perfect scenario for the Bruins. They wait till the offseason where you don't have to give up assets. Maybe you have the money available to sign him, give you arguably the best top 4 in the NHL. Lot to like there. You look now with the fact that Lindholm's week to week, he's banged up. Forbort has put together probably lackluster returns, I would probably say, since coming back from LTIR. Matt Grzelcyk is now banged up. You've got Witherspoon, you've got Lori playing heavy minutes now. Does the state of the left side of Bruins defense right now, do you think that changes their approach to Hannafin? Do you think they could actually be realistic buyers for him, right? Again, you've got a lot to deal with in terms of assets, cap management, all that stuff, but is there any feasible chance that the Bruins all of a sudden jump into the sweepstakes now instead of maybe in July?
I would be very surprised. I really would. And the reason I say that and the reason I feel that way is just I don't know if you have the assets in terms of futures, right? Like if you can get away with it by trading, a high end prospect or two in lieu of a first round pick, maybe. But for me, I think this team, I don't think they want to trade a first round pick. I think they've done it too many times now. I think they've traded. I want to say they've traded 7 of their last 9 first round picks or something
Yeah.
crazy, or 5 of their last 8. It's something insane like that, right? And so at a certain point, you have to stop doing that. And you have to stop doing that because you also don't have a lot of second round picks. You also don't have a third round pick. Like you got to stop doing it at a certain point. And I think that the Bruins have to embrace this year as a true transitional bridge year. And you have to look at that and say, okay, like if there's an injury like you're going through right now, Mason Lohrei is going to play. Is it going to be perfect? Nope, but we're going to find out what he has. And I go back, I said this before, but I go back to 2008. David Krejci was not supposed to be in their lineup in the playoffs, but he was because Bergeron got injured. Krejci got injured late. Savard got injured late in the regular season. He came back in the playoffs, but David Krejci had to play big minutes because they had no other option. It paid off. The next year, David Krejci had 73 points, and he was good in the playoffs. They won a Stanley Cup in 2011 with him being a point-per-game guy. So if that has to happen this year, and Mason Lohrei has to play top 4 deep minutes for you in the playoffs, or Merkulov or Lysell or whoever has to play big roles in the playoffs, good. It tells me something I need to know about this team for the future. And secondly, when it comes to that 2025 first-round pick, that is likely going to be theirs because the one this year is going to convey. Part of me thinks that in the back of their mind, they're like, we might need that for a center. We might need that for Tomas Hertl, if he becomes available in San Jose. And you put Hertl with Zacha and Pastrnak, and holy shit, now you have another check line 2.0, and it might be even better than what you thought you could get. So I think that's how they kind of look at it. And so I think they want to take their chances with Hanifin on July 1. Now, the part that would suck is that, if a team like Colorado or Toronto or somebody made a move for him, and then they
Florida.
did what you did with, they did what you did with Lindholm. They acquire him and extend him right away. That would suck. But that's kind of a gamble you have to take. Last year you took a lot of gambles. You bring in Bertuzzi, bring in Orlov. You swung for the fences. This year, I think you got to walk away from the table and say, can't do it this year. Sorry. That's what I would do personally.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the most the most proactive approach has to be taking your chances and seeing if he hits the open market. And again, who the hell knows what your cap space is going to be then, whether you decide on what to do with DeBrusque, whether you decide to do a Swaim or what have you. But I'd rather them see where their money is in July and just sign him outright, as opposed to having to jump the gun now, giving up a first-round pick, NHL talent off the roster, whatever that is, like maybe a Lohrei, maybe a Patra. Like, you're giving up one of your few, like, blue chip prospects that you have. There's not a whole lot of them for a guy when you ideally could hopefully just sign him a few months down the road. And again, yes, you run that risk of him going somewhere else, signing elsewhere. Well, them's are the breaks, and that's kind of the situation you're in. If you're the Bruins, you had the luxury of trying to trade from early if you hadn't given up, as you said, 7 first-round picks the last 9 years. Like, sooner or later, the bill is going to have to come due with the way that they've, again, try to be aggressive, try to put teams over the top. Like, I wouldn't call it reckless when you're trying to make the most of Chara's window and Bergeron and Krejci and what have you. But that's the reality of the situation you're in. So if I'm the Bruins, I'm waiting to see what Hanifin does in July. And then if you're able to make a marginal upgrade without having to give up a coveted piece, whether that's a tone-setting fourth-line guy, whether it's just a physical third pairing guy like a Steeler, Labushkin, someone like that, maybe that's the right approach where, again, you're making an upgrade, but you're not giving up one of the few assets you still have out there. So I think that's going to be the most realistic approach the Bruins have to take. Again, it's going to suck if Hanifin goes to Tampa or Florida or someone else like that, but you're just not in that position this year, especially, to be swinging for the fences trying to get that blockbuster deal done.
Yeah, and I just looked it up real quick. If they were to trade the 2025 first-round pick, that would mean that they've traded 6 of their last 8 first-round picks. and that the two ones that didn't were used to take Johnny Beecher, who projects as a fourth line center, bottom six wing, however they want to use him, and Fabian Lysell, who we still haven't seen yet. And so he's a complete unknown in terms of his ceiling and what he can be for your team. So you look at it that way and say, not only would you be trading first round picks, but you wouldn't necessarily be getting true first round pick bang for your buck kind of investments. Like if you traded all these picks, but hey, you got David Pastrnak with one of them, it's like, okay, well, that's fine because you got a top 5 overall talent at 24 with one of those picks. You can afford to trade a couple of them, but like to this point, you haven't really gotten that yet, so it makes it that much harder to trade those kind of picks. So this is a quiet deadline for me. If I'm the Bruins, I'm looking internally, I'm looking in house and saying, the guys that we have in house, this is what we're going to go with, and we hope that they get hot at the right time. It's funny. You mentioned earlier that we were talking about, like, you said you couldn't break up Charlie Coyle and Trent Frederick, right? And I go back to myself earlier in the year, and I was saying, okay, Jake DeBrusk has to be your third best winger. Well, I've kind of thrown that out the window now. And I've said, you know what? Your third best winger can be a rotation. It can be, okay, this week JVR's hot. This week Trent Frederick's hot. This week Jake DeBrusk is hot. Like I've kind of abandoned that notion that Jake DeBrusk has to be your third best winger. Like, because you've seen guys go on some massive heaters here, right? And so if that's the case, it's like, okay, well, your third best guy is a revolving door, and if they're shooting their lights out that week, that's great, and you just have to hope that somebody's always doing it and that you don't have all 3 or 4 guys going cold at the same time. So I think that's how I look at it. That's my stance that's changed since then, and the other stance I've changed is no, I've been consistent with this. Don't trade anything. Don't trade any high end picks. As enticing as it may be, unless the player has term. I'm not doing it this year. I can't do it. Can't do it. Got to pick in the first round sometime.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we have 2 weeks to the deadline. So plenty of decisions to be made there. Plenty more to talk about, I'm sure, in the weeks ahead. So, Ty, before we wrap this one up, where can we find all of your great work?
You can find me at 985sportshub.com. You can also find me on Twitter/X at @_Ty Anderson. I also do a little podcast on 985 with my good friend Matt Dolph. It's the Sports Hub Underground. We do those every week. So hope to hear you there as well.
Yep. And you can find my stuff over at boston.com and the Globe. And you can find me on Twitter, X, whatever the hell it's called, at Conor Ryan _93. So once again, this is episode 206 of Poke the Bear. I'm Conor Ryan. That is Ty Anderson. You guys have a great rest of your week.